Coach, good morning.
Morning. How y'all doing?
How you doing?
Doing good.
I appreciate you being on. I got my son Barry here, who coached everywhere from Texas to Georgia, and I appreciate so much you being on. I know you got a lot of thoughts on your mind with season coming along. Tell me if I made a mistake, or if the people made a mistake by not recruiting you as a point guard.
Oh, absolutely.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, what is the best thing you do, Coach?
For what
Pass or
reason?
shoot it.
For what reason?
Well, we didn't have three-point shots when I played, so, you had to drive to the basket, you had to pass, you had to do other things to score. So I can't shoot a three, but I can do all the rest of it and still play at my age. So, I love it. And everybody that plays basketball thinks they're better than they are.
Did you defend at all?
Oh, yeah, I can defend. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I got that. I'm glad I got that question answered. I want you to tell our listeners, because I think it's important to you and it's important to me, about Nick's kids. I think you've done such a great job. Sometimes, as fans look at coaches and salaries and all, they don't. You've done such a wonderful job, you and Miss Terry, with Nick's kids. Tell our listeners about anything you want to say about that.
Well, it's sort of our way to give back to the community, but really it all started with my dad way back when I was a kid, who did a lot in our community to help a lot of underprivileged kids who lived in coal mining towns, couldn't play, didn't go to college. So he did a lot of things to help them, and my mom said if you can ever have the opportunity, do something that sort of enhances his legacy, and that's really what Nick's Kids is all about. And Miss Terry has really done a fantastic job of that.
You have, I think, a little golf deal for them, don't you, every year?
Yeah, we do. We have some people that really support Nick's Kids, and about the first week of June we have a golf outing, and that's our major fundraiser. But we use a lot of the money that we get from endorsements, commercials, sponsorship, speeches, and that's kind of how we fund it. And the day we report to camp each year, we have almost over 100 organizations for young people and the folks who support the young kids that we support have a luncheon the day we report, and that's always a really fun day for us because it's a lot of positive self-gratification to see that you have an opportunity to do some good, maybe create some opportunities and better quality of life for some young kids.
Coach, hey, it's Barry. You always talk about the quarterback winning the team. When did Jalen Hurts last year win this football team, or last year's football team? And how hard is that for a true freshman to do at that position what he did?
Well, I think that it speaks volumes of, sort of his character, his personality, his leadership, that as a young player, the older players on the team would have that much confidence and respond to him in a positive way like they did. But, I have quite a rapport with the older players. We always have sort of a leadership group that I meet with, and that's kind of how I can sense the pulse of the team. And even though I never really ask them, about Jalen or who the quarterback was, when they start, talking about certain guys on the team, you can always tell what their respect and feel for him is. And even though it was an open battle, I mean, even in the Southern Cal game last year, the first game of the season, he didn't start. He was told that he was going to play. Both quarterbacks got a chance early on, but it was pretty apparent to me that the team really responded to him. And even though there were things that we certainly need to improve on with him, becoming a more efficient passer in his future and for this year, he did a really good job for a true freshman last year.
Yeah, Dad.
Coach, in recruiting, which I did a great deal of, and you do such a great job of, I've always thought that in your evaluation, the most difficult positions to recruit to, as far as evaluating, were offensive linemen and defensive backs. I think being an offensive lineman is hard to. It's difficult. Comment on that for me. Am I wrong on that?
Well, no, I don't think I would say you're wrong, but I think probably to me the most difficult position to recruit is probably quarterback,
Okay.
which is sort of supported by the NFL. There are more bust first-round draft picks that never make it at that position. And I think that's probably true because of the intangibles it takes to play the position are so hard to measure. Other positions, you can define measurables that help you determine, like defensive back. There's three critical factors that a guy has to be able to do. He has to be able to play man-to-man. He's got to be able to tackle. He's got to be able to play the ball in deep part of the field. So at least you have a defined, and if you see a guy that has a fatal flaw in one of those areas, it's hard to fix. And then there's specific physical attributes that you can sort of look for to try to determine whether a guy can do those three things.
Yeah.
Well, offensive line, same type of thing. Can the guy keep feet balance and body control? Does he have any power and explosion to sustain a block? And can he move his feet well enough to have enough range to, pass protect? And so you can look for specific things. Now, size comes into it, character and attitude comes into it. But when you're talking about quarterback, you have all these physical attributes that a guy's got to have, but decision-making, judgment, leadership, all these things sort of start accumulating relative to decision-making and processing information quickly. That's really hard to evaluate, because if a guy doesn't perform in that kind of offense where you see him do it consistently, which especially with the spread now, a lot of people don't have to do that. Guy could be a very productive quarterback and not be able to do those things. And I think that's why you see so many failures at the position and so many busts in the NFL.
Good point, Barry.
Coach, what is your philosophy on hiring staff? When your offensive coordinator job came up, and you'd be amazed, well, you wouldn't be amazed, all the names that came across the airways here, who you were going to hire, none of them were Brian Daboll. Do you keep a list of guys and say, okay, if this position opens, these are the guys I want to talk to? What's your philosophy when you go to hire somebody?
I think that's one of the most difficult things, and one can probably attest to this. The longer you're a head coach, the further sort of removed from assistant coaches that you get.
Yeah.
Because the best opportunity you have to meet other coaches is either you play against them, right, and you develop a respect for what they do, or you see them on the recruiting trail. Well, assistants see assistants. Head coaches don't always see assistants. So the longer you're a head coach, the more removed from assistants that you get. And in our case, people who have worked for us before that we know, and we know who they are, and they've worked for people that kind of came up in our sort of family tree of coaches, are always people that we look for. But critical factors is people have to be willing to buy in and commit to your system of how you do things, and they have to be a good fit with the rest of your staff. Those are probably the two critical factors that I would say are important now. Being a good teacher, being smart, getting along, motivating players, teaching players, developing players, there's a lot of factors that go with it, but those first two probably are the things that are most important.
Coach, where did you learn to stay so laser focused? It seems like whether you win the championship, most people relax. You get more focused. You guys didn't win the last game against Clemson. You're the same guy. Who taught you how to stay focused like that?
I don't know that. I don't know that that's really something that you learn.
Yeah.
I don't know. My dad was, pretty much a perfectionist, and I had a unique situation growing up. I worked for my dad at the service station, so you had to treat the customers and do a good job. And if you didn't wash the car right, he made you do it again. So he was a pretty strong boss. And then he was my coach. In Pop Warner football, Little League baseball. Legion, and he was tough. I mean, he was a tough, hard-nosed, and, we'd be 24-0, and, he'd be on your tail, in the third base box. So it was almost like it was never good enough. He was always focused on what you had to do the next thing better. And, the way he always put it, when you're climbing a mountain, you always look up. Very few people get to the top. People who get to the top don't stay on top very often. So the moral of that story is you better keep climbing or somebody's going to bite you in the butt. And that's very true. It's very true in life. It's true in what we do. Everybody's shooting at you when you have success. So if you get complacent, you're going to get shot down. And you got to keep trying to make your organization better, and you can really never get satisfied. And it's a little more difficult, not for me personally, but for the people around the players, sometimes coaches, because there's so much information out there now with the internet, Facebook, Twitter, and people can get a little overwhelmed with some of that stuff and let them kind of affect who they are and what they're doing and what their focus really is. So that's why I don't do any of that stuff, is I don't want to be affected by it.
Well, I know you got to go, but I wanted to say that, I think you end up being on both ends of the field during practice. I see so many coaches now, especially on the offensive end, that stay on the offensive end and never go to the defensive end. I'm not here to criticize coaches, but I think the one thing about you, although you probably stay on the defensive end a little bit more because you're teaching the defensive backs, you're on the offensive end as well. Is that something you did at Michigan State back a long time ago, or is that changed for you at all during the years?
Well, no, it hasn't. I mean, I try to keep my finger on the pulse on offense, philosophically mostly, and making sure that we're doing the things that, first of all, our players are capable of doing, and that usually starts with the quarterback, and that the system doesn't sort of trump the ability of the players that you have. And hopefully the system is flexible enough that it can engage whatever group of talented players you have at whatever position. And we've had to change a lot in the last 3 years because of the quarterback. But I probably spend more time on defense. And I don't know if I've ever told this story publicly, but Buddy Ryan was one of the best defensive coordinators ever, and I grew up as a defensive coach and a defensive coordinator, and I used to go visit him when he was a coordinator of the Chicago Bears, and they had the best defense in the history of ball probably in the 80s. And he was a good friend, and then I was a defensive coordinator of the Cleveland Browns. He was a head coach, I think, of the Arizona Cardinals. We played him, late in the season, and he was losing his job. And I just asked him, I said, Buddy, what was different about being a coordinator and being a head coach? And, not in an arrogant way, but this is a lesson that I always remembered. He said, I was always somebody's best assistant. I was Mike Ditka's best assistant. I ran his defense and did a good job. He said, but I wasn't my best assistant when I was head coach. So that told me he didn't play to his strengths to contribute to his own staff when he was a head coach. So I've always tried to make sure that the things that I knew, whether it was special teams or defense, that I impacted the most, and I didn't go try to call plays on offense, which I'd never done since I was a high school quarterback, to mess up our team, even though I wanted to keep a pulse on exactly philosophically what we were doing. And so that's kind of how I try to manage it. I want to try to be my best assistant if I can be, and that comes from what your expertise was when you grew up in the profession.
Yeah. I always say on this show, we're going to let you go, that the atmosphere when I was there with Coach Bryant, I'm not trying to compare anything, was, when the atmosphere is different. The atmosphere is different at your place. And I watch the atmosphere when I'm with you around golfing events. It's a little bit different. Some people have the ability to change the atmosphere. I think Coach Bryant did, and I think you did. So I appreciate you being a friend all the way back when we played golf together back years ago. So I appreciate you being on, and look forward to seeing you some more.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, and have a good day. And we're we're sort of excited and anxious about how this team's going to respond to the challenges of this season. So we're looking forward to it. So
Coach,
thanks so much.
Coach, I hope your dad paid you more than mine did when I worked for him, because you didn't get paid very much when you worked for my dad. So I hope your dad paid you more than I got.
Wasn't any better where I grew up either, I can promise you.
Yeah, that's tough. Thanks,
Thank
Coach.
you.
Thank you.